preparing live stream, and we are good. All right, greetings and welcome to another episode of the Unnamed Bracketology podcast. My name is Kerry Miller, joined as always by my good friend Graham Dorn. It is Sunday afternoon. The rain is the snow is starting to fall in sheets here. Um, Iowa, Wisconsin, they're about tied right now, midway through the first half, but we got to knock out this weekend recap, and that's not really going to change anything. The result of that game, I feel like if Iowa wins, they're probably back end of the 6 seed, and Wisconsin's a 7. Otherwise, it flips around. But we would not be a bracketology podcast if we didn't at least address the top 16 reveal. Graham, what was your biggest lesson learned, or something you're going to take away from it, or maybe just something that surprised you the most?
Was surprised by a couple of things. Number one, I was surprised Florida was ahead of Kansas. That one, because when we did our mock committee, like you literally set up a spreadsheet where it was top 5 wins for Kansas, worst 5 losses for Kansas, top 5 wins for Florida, worst 5 losses for Florida. And side by side, literally, like game by game, was better for Kansas the entire way through. And so, like, if the committee had done that, I actually think it's really tough to come to the conclusion Florida should be ahead, even if you thought Florida was better, which I think everybody thinks Florida's the better team. But still, like at some point when that many results go one way, you have to say the team earned it. So I do have a bit of a theory on two separate things in the what the committee did. That
Conspiracies, bring it. Bring the
I
conspiracy.
have an idea, right? The committee's been under a lot of fire recently about, oh, they don't do contingency brackets. They say they do, but they don't really do it. I believe the committee. I believe they really do these contingencies. And to talk about what I think happened here is I think they voted on Wednesday, and then Wednesday night, Kansas went to Oklahoma State, picking up a win that was worth about half a game in WAB, which might not sound a lot, but we know in WAB world that's actually pretty good. Like half a game in WAB could be 2 or 3 wins depending on the opponent. Like that's a pretty decent win. So I think that game wasn't included in the initial vote because it hadn't happened yet. So when they went to scrub on Thursday, they were like, it's only a win at Oklahoma State. It's not a, that's not a huge win. I do think it probably would have been a big enough win that had they already had that included before they voted, they probably would have voted a little bit differently. I think the same thing happened with Alabama and Vanderbilt. Alabama had not yet beaten Arkansas in 2 overtimes at home, and Vanderbilt had not yet lost to Missouri. So I think they looked at the Vanderbilt loss at Missouri. Like, they almost hit that shot at the end. If that had gone in, they win. Missouri's a tournament team. That's not a bad loss. And yeah, Alabama was probably expected to beat Arkansas. They won 2 overtimes by 2 points. Not a huge result. Let's not scrub them. I think what I did wrong was factored in what had already happened, whereas they kind of looked at it as like those aren't scrubbable moments. Where they thought UConn losing to Creighton was a scrubbable moment, which it is. And the other thing I think they thought was worth a scrub was Texas Tech not losing at Arizona State, but losing Toppin in the process. I think when they lose that game and Toppin, that was enough for them to scrub. So with that in mind, honestly, like if I'm right that that's what happened, pretty much in lockstep with the committee. So I really can't complain about anything.
I think we need to make scrubbable moments a hashtag moving forward. But yeah, I think we kind of talked about that with, along the 1 seed line with UConn. We're like, well, it happened, Wednesday night. Are they going to really factor that in? And I think they did on that one, since it was a seed line cut, for sure. I think that's obviously that was factored in. Otherwise, Connecticut was absolutely a 1 seed. I think maybe they almost over penalized a little bit, but that was kind of my conspiracy theory brain a little bit. Was I think there was already an argument for Connecticut, and then you just factored in, the fact that they would have had to scrub it after the fact. I thought they would have still been 4 overall, but I had no matter what 4, 5, and 6 ended up being, I wasn't going to be shocked or outraged or anything. But I'm with you on Florida and Kansas. I believe I had Kansas at 8 overall and Florida at 11 overall. So it wasn't that close for me. So I don't know if it was more so a case of Florida's getting more credit than, predictive metrics darlings would in the past, or if it's a case of the committee not knowing what the hell to do with the Darren Peterson situation with Kansas and how to evaluate the Jayhawks. But that was the surprise to me. I think I missed the most on Virginia. I think I had them at 12 and they were at 16. But I mean, we've talked about Virginia a ton. It's like every time you look at it, it's clean, but when you dig into it, it's not great. And the committee dug into it. They weren't, just satisfied to see that 4-0 record against Quad 1A. They looked and saw that none of these wins are actually against, top five seeds. Three of them are against bubble teams. Like it's not great. So I think that speaks volumes to the fact that the committee's not just looking at quadrant based records, but that was really Florida and Virginia were really my only takeaways. Alabama, I think I hear you that it may have been just the Arkansas game wasn't fully factored in. Maybe it is, even if there's not a committee mandate to do anything about the Bediako situation, could just be one or two voters are like, screw Alabama. You guys broke the rules as far as we're concerned. We're going to dock you a seed line if we can, type of thing. I don't know. But I was a little surprised that Alabama didn't make the cut, but also not surprised because we knew there was that, little conspiracy going on. Anything else on the top 16 you want to get into before we dive into the results?
Let's go to the results.
Let's go to the results. Share screen. Boom, boom, boom. All right. These we're gonna start with the five brutal losses because that's what's on the left of my spreadsheet. First and foremost, Southern California. The Trojans lost at home to Oregon. Not only was that a bad resume loss for sure, but they were also like as full strength as they've been all season. Baker Mazzara came back in that game, scored like 23 points off the bench. Arenas played, and they still suffered by far their worst loss of the season. So for me, that was enough to drop them out. I think we've seen enough that USC probably doesn't belong, and I think the committee is going to discount some of the wins early in the season without or when Rodney Rice was playing, similar to the West Virginia situation last year with Tucker DeVries. But you still have USC just barely in. I think that's fine because the bubble is hideous, as we'll get to in a little bit. But any thoughts on that game in particular?
I just think it was the sort of loss that changes an entire trajectory. Like USC had enough cushion that I really think they could have just done the baseline and gotten in, but now they don't have that cushion at all. And to your point, it's either barely in or barely out right now. So even splitting with UCLA might not be enough. And I think if they hadn't lost to Oregon, splitting with UCLA probably was going to be enough. So really, really costly loss.
Yeah, I think it's no longer enough. They need to at least go 2-2 down the stretch. What they've Nebraska and Wisconsin or something like that. I know they don't have a gimme left. They have three tough games and then a home game against UCLA that's kind of a toss up. And I think they now need to steal at least one win to make the dance. Although who knows? Maybe Santa Clara will lose a couple of games. Maybe Indiana will fall to 4-15 against quads 1 and 2, and we'll just have to, get to 68 somehow. But right now, I'm able to justify USC out. San Diego State loses at Colorado State after a previous home loss to Grand Canyon. Even before both of those losses, like I had San Diego State just barely in. At this point, they're, you see, we both have them as just a pure out. They are at least 5 spots out, probably more like 8 or 9. Now they can play their way back in. They still play Utah State at home. They still have road games against New Mexico and Boise State. So that's three quad one games that they could, capitalize on to get back in. But they did not take care of business this week. I think the Aztecs are probably done. I mean, I had them in, and even part of that was just I couldn't justify believing with this bubble that it's going to be a one bid Mountain West, but now I feel better about New Mexico getting in, so I'm okay with San Diego State being all the way out. Anything on the Mountain West situation? I mean, we'll get into New Mexico a little bit when we get into our each of our bubbles.
I mean, unfortunately for San Diego State, we've talked about this for months at this point. I've just not seen it with San Diego State's profile at all this year, and this just further confirms there's really not much to be supportive of there.
Brutal loss. Kansas loses by what, 16 at home to Cincinnati. I'm just gonna let you talk on that one. It doesn't change a whole lot. I mean, Kansas is now at the bottom of our three lines. Cincinnati's still kind of hopeless, but what are your thoughts on your team's worst loss in a long time?
Well, honestly, I just thought they didn't really have a ton of energy. I also think if you watch some of those Darren Peterson threes, like those were in and out, right? Like if those go in, they're probably up six instead of down six. Kerry, we talk about this all the time. Like basketball just comes down at its most basic level to a lot of times it just comes down to whether the ball goes in. Cincinnati had guys that had made, I think, 7 combined three-pointers in the season, and they shooting 17%, and they just go off on threes. Like, sometimes it happens, right? And Cincinnati, give them credit. Like, as the game progressed, they got better. Kansas got flustered. You don't usually see that now in Fieldhouse. It tends to go the opposite way, but it didn't on this occasion. Cincinnati played really well. Give them a lot of credit for I thought they were dead, dead. Like, I really thought they were dead, dead. I don't think they're dead, dead now. If they win at Texas Tech, they still wouldn't be in the bracket, but they would be within knocking distance of the bracket. So I don't know. Bearcats, Wes Miller, maybe making a little bit of a run. Somebody to keep an eye on here. Couldn't be luckier, by the way, getting Texas Tech without Toppin because they could
Yeah.
easily win that game. Like you saw what they did against Kansas, anyways. They could have won it even if Toppin was playing, but now it's especially winnable. And that's going to be even if you think that's not the best road win because Toppin's not available, it's still really, really hard to win in Lubbock, even if he's not available. Cincinnati, they've got a path, and I did not think they had a path before this. But to your point about Kansas, doesn't change a whole lot. Still think they're on the three line. The big difference to me is I think the one seed path has closed. I think had they
Yeah.
beaten Cincinnati and then followed it up with wins against Houston and Arizona to win a Big 12 championship, I do think that possibility was open. I think that's gone, and even the two seed seems very unlikely because now you need to probably sweep Houston and Arizona to get on the two line. So I think the bigger question for Kansas is do they drop to a four seed, which is certainly in play now.
We got a question from Tony Schneider, our good friend of the pod. When it gets tough to select these teams on the bubble, what do you feel differentiates the teams that close to the cut line, with it seeming like no one wants to be in this year on the bubble? And it is, I know, made for March. Anthony's talked about it before, where it's like it's kind of shaving strokes off your golf game, right? Comparing teams on the bubble is a whole lot different from comparing teams for like a four seed and comparing teams for a one seed. And there are just so many different types of resumes. Like we've got Ohio State with an 0-9 record against quad one. We've got Santa Clara with one quad one win, I think at home against St. Mary's, and a terrible quad four loss to Loyola Chicago. We've got some teams with a couple of quality wins and some without them. And I mean, I think in the end, just averaging the metrics, it does kind of come out. Like that's the lazy way to do it. And I hate that that's what it's becoming, but you end up just kind of defaulting to the metrics when it's hard to really compare teams head to head. I don't know how you feel about that one.
I don't know about that. If you were like, I guess I've always said metrics will get you in a range, and then
Yeah.
bracketology figures out where the team goes from there. And that's kind
Yeah.
of how I feel about it. Like if you were to look at USC, there's a reason we're a few spots different because we're probably looking at different aspects of the profile and guessing this is what the committee will choose to prioritize. Because if you're on the bubble, necessarily you've got a lot of bad on your profile. If you're on the bubble, you also have some good because you can't be on the bubble without some quality things about the resume. So I guess for me, it really just comes down to what is most stomachable. And I don't know if stomachable is a word, but I'm using it here. For example, I look at USC and I'm like, well, at least they're still 9-7 against quads
Yeah.
one and two, and they won at Wisconsin. So I can give that quality road win over a tournament team to me an elite win because Wisconsin to me is a top 7 seed, 6 seed in my bracket today. An elite road win plus winning overall against quads one and two. I can still keep that team in the tournament even if I don't love the profile. Whereas you probably looked at, hey, they've got 2 bad losses. And we've talked all year about now teams aren't even losing in quad two all that often. Like a lot of
Yeah.
times they're just losing in quad one now. And to have 2 losses in quad three is very rare for a bubble team right now. So you probably prioritize that aspect. So Tony, obviously we love talking with you all the time. I think it's going to come. I think this is how it works on the real committee. Some people will pick out certain aspects of the profile that matter more to them than others, and that's how you're going to get these differing opinions. And when the committee goes together at the end of the day, it will be one of two things will happen. One person in that room will convince others in the room to vote the way they want, or they'll split the votes. And you could see something like Kerry and I, where maybe USC comes out to like 46th overall because they split the votes.
I mean, I will say with USC, I don't know what they're going to do with the injury situations that they've dealt with, and I think it's just easier to among all of the bubble teams to kind of keep them out because we don't really know what USC is at full strength because they never have been. I don't know how those Rodney Rice results are going to factor in, but I don't. It is tough, and it even from like as a personal like the way you're looking at like you even change your opinion just looking in between bubble teams. Like it's almost I think when we had Matt Browning on, he was saying like, yeah, I feel like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth because I'll say this at one point and then this at another, and it's like you just find different things that I think I like your stomachable, scrubbable moments and stomachable resume points. I mean, you're crushing it today. Let's go back to the brutal losses. Clemson losing at home to Florida State, although I mean, we've talked about the Seminoles a lot over the last couple of weeks. They've now won 7 out of 9. They're just handing out bad losses left and right. That did bump them up to 74 in the net. So it was temporarily a quad three loss. Now it's quad two. It's still bad. And I think Clemson is starting to trickle down towards the bubble, but also like I have them as my top 10, you have them as your bottom 9, but it does still feel like they're pretty safe. Like you have to drop really far to fall all the way down to this, USC VCU type of range. And Clemson's, 10-8 against quads 1 and 2. They don't have any particularly bad losses. So I think even though they're falling, I don't know how much further they can fall unless they just lose out. Like if they lose these remaining games against Louisville and North Carolina, but then I think their last game is at home against Boston College, or it's a game they absolutely should win. So if they lose the two to Louisville and UNC, and then get like a quad three, quad four home win, they would be 10-10 against quads 1 and 2. It becomes a little questionable, but I do think this bubble is so gross. Like we're looking at Indiana at 4-10 against quads 1 and 2, and we both have Indiana in. So I think it definitely hurts Clemson, but it doesn't. It's not a mortal wound. Would you? Obviously, you agree if you have them at 36.
Yeah, and I think one thing that people might not understand about when we put these lists together, it's not like we think the team that's 35th is just barely better than the team that's 36th, right? I look at Clemson as being like, oh, I have to put them on the 9 line? Like, I don't they're not a 9 seed. Why do I have to put them on the 9 line? But somebody has to go there. So,
It's
like,
because you hate Miami, Ohio.
but that is an aspect that I think people don't really understand. Like, oh, you'll get these comments all the time, right, Care? Where people be like, "They're not a 4 seed." I'm like, I agree, man. Like, I don't think they should be a 4 seed. But who else deserves to go there? Somebody must go into the spot. So,
Yeah.
Clemson has an ugly profile, in my opinion, but it's so much better than what's down on the true cut line that I just don't see them falling there absent a terrible end of the season.
Yeah, I mean that's been the case with Auburn for the past weeks. Like, how could a well now they're 15-12. It's like, how could a 14-12 team be in? I'm like, just go ahead, find me 37 better at-large resumes, please. I'd love to. I don't think they belong in, and you just get to a point where you have to put somebody in this spot. So yeah, and then last but well, kind of least, VCU jumped out to like a 15-point lead early in the first half at St. Louis and then just got boat raced the rest of the way by the Billikens, as only the Billikens can do. VCU, I mean, they're not dead. We both have them at 72 overall, but it does feel like they are dead just because they're not going to be able to get those quality wins. Like for them to beat St. Louis again, we're not going to be talking about them as a bubble team because they will have clinched the auto bid for the A10. So even a win, a home win over George Mason, a road win over Dayton, like that's nice. I don't think it's going to get them there unless just nobody else on the bubble plays their way in. Usually there are, we've seen how ugly the bubble is right now, but usually there are at least a couple of teams who, kind of storm their way in out of nowhere, or at least, a team like Ohio State who's been just kind of languishing there for forever. They finally pick up that win, and then we have to put them in, type of thing. We'll see if that happens. I mean, maybe VCU just kind of sneaks in the way that we kind of think that Santa Clara and St. Mary's are going to just kind of skate by, but it's not looking good at this point.
The only three letters that matter anymore for VCU are WAB. They've got to get that WAB up to the spot where the committee just can't say no. And I still think that's possibly attainable if other bubble teams fall down the stretch. If they were to get themselves the Sunday in the A10 final and they've won out until then, that's a nice WAB
Yeah.
score.
Yeah.
If there's enough bubble teams falling down the stretch, it's still possible. I just think necessarily they're going to be taking a loss in the A10 tournament, and they're going to be going to the committee saying, hey, we won a lot of the games we were supposed to win. We didn't win any of the up games, but we won a lot of the games we were supposed to win. Perhaps the best thing that can happen for VCU, and it kind of seems counterintuitive. You don't want another team to take a spot in the field, but maybe you want Virginia Tech to finish strong and have the committee say, hey, look, Virginia Tech just won at UNC or they just won at UVA. We're going to put them in the field. Look who also beat Virginia Tech on a neutral court, and look who has a nice WAB. But if VCU gets in, I'm sure it's just going to be the WAB score that does it.
Yeah, actually typed mine wrong. I have them at 71 because I have them right ahead of VCU, or excuse me, ahead of Virginia Tech because of that head-to-head result. There were a lot of questions on Twitter today about, oh, now that Virginia Tech is 50th in the net, VCU has that quad one win. Do they look better? It's like, no, it's still the same win. I can't get that through some people's head that the quad buckets doesn't matter. I know we talk all the time about, Ohio State needs a quad one win, but really what we're saying is they need a quality win. And it's easiest to just like point at here, look, they're 0-9 in these games.
Yeah,
But
I think
it's the same result.
that's the key is we use it as shorthand to say they're winning most of their quality games, they're losing most of their quality games. And I do think total score can matter a little bit, right? If you have a team like USC, I mentioned they're 9-7 overall there, right? If that number was 9-9, maybe it's a lot less enticing to me. But I'm like,
Yeah.
at least they're winning most of them. But it's not like the number itself matters entirely. It's just a little tiny small piece of the pie to say, hey, they win a lot.
All right, let's move over to the biggest results. And we probably don't need to spend much time on these because it didn't really change a whole lot. I mean, obviously, Duke beating Michigan. Now the Blue Devils moved to one overall. Whatever. I was at that game. It was fun. Sitting, there was a Michigan blogger to my right. There was a Michigan um, they had a suite rented out. They were going through Stella Artois like they were freaking water. Watching them get drunker and screaming at the refs was fun until Cameron Boozer started getting whistled for fouls. Then they stopped complaining about the refs. But all it really does is swaps 1 and 2 on the seed list. Arizona's win at Houston keeps Arizona at 3. Honestly, keeps kind of put Arizona in the mix to maybe even jump over Michigan for 2, but I don't think so yet. But it keeps it close. Um, you dropped Houston to 8. We don't need to get into that, how you ended up dropping Houston 2 spots and moving Illinois up a spot for a loss at UCLA. But either way, Arizona's still a 1 seed, Houston's still a 2 seed. I think the biggest one here is BYU finally getting a good win. I mean, they had some good wins, but they finally got a great win here. Still at home. It'd be nice to see them do it on the road, but got that win, I think, by 10 over Iowa State. And Rob Wright didn't even really do much of anything. I mean, it was DeBonsa and then it was the other Cougars, which really impressed me more than anything. But for the first time in who knows how long, we agree on Iowa State's seed. They are still 5 overall, and we agree on BYU's seed, 21 overall. Anything you want to say on any of those 3 games?
Michigan, it's interesting because it had come out that they want to go to Philadelphia for their first 2 rounds, and so moving to the 2nd overall seed, they no longer get that option.
Yeah.
So if they end up 2nd overall, they're going to Buffalo instead of Philadelphia, so a little bit of a bracketing thing there. Houston, I have them 8th overall now, just not that it was a bad loss to Arizona, but it just becomes all the more glaring that they've had a lot of chances to pick up really, truly awesome wins, and they haven't yet. So I think they need to win at Kansas if they still have a hope for a 1 seed. Without that, I just don't think they have enough to get into that 1 seed conversation. As for Iowa State, could have maybe fallen a little bit further, but then you look at them winning at Purdue, still beating Houston. Yeah, 5 overall still seems pretty good. Iowa State could still get to that 1 line.
Yeah, I think Iowa State would have slipped if Houston at 6 overall had won, if Illinois at 7 overall had won. So they slipped behind UConn, but that's it. Because as you hear, UConn won at Villanova. I'm starting to have a Villanova problem. We'll go back to the Tennessee Vanderbilt game, but um, and we've talked about it before in our Big East discussions, but Villanova only has that, and it's still listed as a neutral win over Wisconsin. After that, it's a season sweep of Seton Hall. Like, as much I texted you about this earlier, like you keep talking about the Louisville from last year, and I think that's going to be Villanova. Like all of the metrics still say they should be like a 6 or a 7 seed. I'm like, I'm not seeing it. Where are the wins? You're probably going to be in an 8-9 game, but I couldn't get them there. I almost had them as a 6 even, which that would have that would have been not stomachable. Where are you at with Villanova? Because you have them at 27.
Yeah, I want them to be at the 8 line. I just can't get them there because there's not enough teams to do that. What I do think will ultimately end up happening for Villanova, unless they finish the season great from here on out, is they will drop to that 8 seed line because somebody else is going to do something more that pushes them above where Villanova's at. I think Villanova and Louisville this year are very similar in the way they haven't performed against the top teams on their schedule. I think the
Hmm.
big difference there is Louisville still has a few road opportunities to beat tournament teams. I think they actually have 3 road opportunities still in ACC play to beat teams currently in the bracket. So Louisville can fix their problem instantly. All they have to do is win. Villanova doesn't have the chance to fix their problem. So I think Villanova is probably eventually going to fall down to that 8 seed line, to be determined on Louisville. If Louisville doesn't win those road games, their problem becomes even more glaring because it's just
Yeah.
more opportunities to show they didn't get it done.
Yeah. Villanova does still play at St. John's. I think that's on Saturday. It's coming up. But if they lose that one and then they lose to, whether it's UConn or St. John's, who's the 2 seed, if they lose that semifinal and they end up 0-5 against Connecticut and St. John's with just that win over Wisconsin, then it gets really problematic. So we'll see where Villanova lands, but they're still safely in. And then Tennessee and Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt was 15 in the top 16 reveal. They were the second highest SEC team, correct, behind only Florida. And now I have instantly dropped them to my fifth highest SEC team because that is such a cluster of Tennessee, Alabama, Arkansas, and Vanderbilt. I was going to put Vanderbilt just ahead of Arkansas, and then I remembered that they got drilled at Arkansas and decided to put Vanderbilt even behind the Razorbacks. But Tennessee, you still have them not quite on the 4 line. I was a little surprised to see that. How did you land there?
Just the same teams that the committee had on the 4 line, didn't lose, kept them on the 4 line, except I still think Alabama should have been there initially. And so I moved Alabama in. Nothing that Tennessee didn't do, just more of a recognition of Alabama having a really good profile.
Yeah. Question from Playing Devil's Advocate Pod. Do you guys think the magic number for Mizzou is 2? And I'm going to have to look at Missouri's schedule to answer that question. What do they have remaining? I do have Missouri at, I think, 40. I could look at my spreadsheet. Where do
Yeah,
I
I
have
think
Missouri?
Missouri is
Yeah, I
an
have them at
11
40.
seed for me outside of the play-ins. So just a recognition that they've had really good wins this year. Abnormally really good wins for a bubble team. I'd say it's a strong profile for a bubble team as far as quality wins go. Obviously, they have other holes in their profile or they wouldn't be there. but the quality wins won't be a problem moving forward. So as long as they get down to this final stretch of Tennessee, Mississippi State, Oklahoma, and Arkansas and win two of those, probably in pretty decent shape. If they win three, they're a lock. Put them in the tournament.
Yeah, I think even at two with a max of one or two bid thieves, I think they're probably comfortably in. Even at one, they could stay in the conversation. Because I remember when we were doing our, what would it take, looking at the WOB and everything, just because they were projected to lose all six of those final games, and they already got that win over Vanderbilt. And I think at the time, if they went 2-4, they were still going to be like a full win above bubbles. But I would have to look at that again to see where they're at. But two, I think, feels pretty good on Missouri. Three would definitely lock them in. But I also think they might lose all four. Key bubble results. We can kind of fly through these because we've been going a bit long. UCLA gets a big home win over Illinois, much needed. I had UCLA as like my third team out before this. Now they vault straight to top 11 seed for me, near the bottom of the 10 line for you. What do you think UCLA needs to do down the stretch, though, to conserve that spot in the field? Because they still have two games against USC. What else do they have? I know USC had the harder of the schedule between those two. UCLA has at Minnesota and versus Nebraska. So not easy. They're all four losable games.
I think 2-2 is probably enough because, as you
Yeah.
said, they're all four losable games. Three wins, same as Missouri, would definitely lock
Yep.
them in.
Fittingly, UCLA and Missouri in the same spot after Donovan Dent hits that Tyus Edney layup last night to beat Illinois. Where are we at? I lost my spreadsheet. There it is.
Auburn versus
Auburn. Yeah, two big SEC results there. Auburn improves to 3 games above 500 again with a home win over Kentucky, and Georgia gets a home win over Texas. I think it was a big win for Auburn and a bad loss for Texas, more so than anything. It did Georgia. I mean, their win at Kentucky earlier in the week was the bigger result for them. They had been my last team in. Now they're up to a 9 seed. You see how quickly things can change along the bubble when you actually want to be in the tournament. But yeah, we both ended up with Texas now down in the play-in game range, even though just 48 hours ago, we were saying we thought that Texas was probably the most comfortably in of the SEC's bubble teams. What any thoughts on these two games that you wanted to touch on?
I've been trying to lock Kentucky forever, and I just can't
Yeah,
do it because they keep losing. Not worried about them missing the field, but man, their seed continues to slide, and I keep thinking it should be further down than it is. But then again, nobody seems to want to be a 6 seed. So like, I'm just like, I don't know. I got to throw you in somewhere. As for Texas, tough loss because it does make them a true bubble team. Had they won that game, I think they were going to stay above the bubble fray. Now it's Georgia looking like they're in pretty good shape.
uh, lost my thing again. Escape. There we go. Boo, boo, boo. Goodness gracious. All right, TCU with a clutch home win over West Virginia. It wasn't a particularly big win in terms of, what it added to their WOB or anything like that, but it does get them into the field for both of us. I think I had them as my first team out heading into yesterday. Got a little bit of help from other results, but do you think the Horned Frogs are going to get in when all is said and done?
Yeah, I think they probably will. And it comes back to Tony Schneider's question about how do you evaluate those bubble teams once they're
Yeah,
really kind of at that cut line and you're looking for anything stomachable. And Florida and Wisconsin, those
yeah.
sound pretty darn good. You beat Iowa State too. Like TCU just has wins that other bubble teams don't have. And so I think that you just take it over the bad. Okay, I get it. You lost to New Orleans. It's been established. You lost a clunker against Utah, but TCU did things that other bubble teams don't. Put them in the field. We want to see teams that can win tournament games.
Yeah, I think if their remaining schedule is like it's favorable, but also that's not good. Because if they were to drop a game to Arizona State, Kansas State, or at home to Cincinnati, now there's that fifth wart on their resume. I think they almost need to go 3-1 just to keep the status quo. I mean, you really can't lose at Kansas State, as broken as that team looks these days. And you really should win at home against Arizona State and Cincinnati. So I'll I don't know. I think 3-1. They probably need to go 3-1. And then the West Coast Conference teams both survived. I mean, they didn't even survive. They both won comfortably, but they won. I think St. Mary's was at Seattle and Santa Clara was at San Francisco. And now it's the big stretch. They get the head-to-head game. Is that on Wednesday? And then on Saturday, the big St. Mary's and Gonzaga finale. Both of those games will be in Moraga. We both have them in. You said earlier today that Santa Clara's resume makes you a little sick. Obviously, it makes me a little sicker than it makes you if you have them in at 42 and I have them at 46. What's your case for the Broncos being in even ahead of the Dayton cut line?
I have a problem with the West Coast Conference because I cannot figure out how to seed them right now. And I feel like I need to get the full data in before I truly make any final conclusions because I keep looking at the resume metrics, the efficiency metrics for St. Mary's, and they're pretty darn good. Like, there's really not a whole lot to pick apart there, but they don't have the big win. And I'm like, well, they've only played a few games against top quality teams, though. Some of these Big Ten teams are going 0-9 against Quad One and trying to get in the tournament. Not pointing any fingers. So when I look at St. Mary's, I'm giving them a little bit of a break. And Santa Clara at 1.55 wins above bubble. I mean, we're talking about 2 times what WVU was last year. Like, that's really almost 2 times what WVU was. And if we thought that was crazy, they were left out. It's going to be hard to leave out 1.55. So I'm waiting for one of those two teams to suffer the big blow when they play each other that can really knock their resume down. And I don't think the winner is going to get much of a bump. I think it's the loser that's going to get punished.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And like looking at their resumes, the reason the metrics are so good is because they're both 16-1 against quads 2 and 3. Like all that individually, none of that does much. At no point do you look at it, a home win over Seattle or a road win over Pacific, and you go, wow, can't believe they got that one. But you get them 16 out of 17 times, and it just stacks up, even with a terrible loss to Loyola Chicago for Santa Clara. But yeah, I still think it's if Santa Clara, what's the path? If St. Mary's beats Santa Clara but then loses to Gonzaga, I think that's a path for one bid. If it goes the other way, if Santa Clara finishes the season sweep and then St. Mary's finally gets that quad one win that's been eluding their grasps, maybe that's the path for a 3 bid. Right now, we both have it at 3. Obviously, the over under would be exactly 2 if Vegas sets such a line because God only knows what's going to happen. And now let's get to our actual bubble. There we go. It's not a whole lot different outside of, mentioned earlier, I'm a bit lower on USC. One big difference is that I have New Mexico over here at 42. You have them down here at 70. So you have the Mountain West as a 1 bid league. I still am keeping the faith. I think it'll be a 2 bid league. And I feel even a little bit better about New Mexico now that they're, no longer right up there with San Diego State, who they previously lost to, I believe, if not mistaken, in Viejas. Um, Anything about the overall, last 4 in, first 4 out? I mean, we're not very, very different here. Not surprising.
Well, you nailed the one thing that I did want to talk about, which is Santa Clara versus New Mexico. New Mexico hammered Santa Clara, but it was in Albuquerque. That's a tough one. It's one of those where the head-to-head can matter, especially because of the margin, but the fact it was a home game might not matter so much. I to the West Coast conference point, I throw the Mountain West in there too. Throw New Mexico in there too. I am not wed by any means yet to St. Mary's and Santa Clara in New Mexico where I have them. I feel
Yeah.
like it's a little bit easier with power conference teams to evaluate where they're currently standing. There's still a few important data points I want to see for these Mountain West and West Coast conference teams to figure out where they go because I do not like having New Mexico out and Santa Clara in. It does not fit well with me when Santa Clara has a worse loss than New Mexico. I just think that with the emphasis on WAB, I'm going to need to see that wob start to go a little bit down for Santa Clara and a little bit up for New Mexico before I make the call. Just because if the NCAA is talking about it that much, and their PR campaign for wob is intense this year, I don't. They weren't talking about net this much when net released. Like they are all in on wob this year. Whether the actual final results show that or not, I don't know, but the PR campaign is going pretty crazy in favor of it. So I'm just waiting for maybe one or two little results to change where I can be like, all right, now Santa Clara, New Mexico look close on WOB. Now I evaluate the full resume and boom. So like it could change quickly. I just need to see those scores change a little bit before I make the move.
Last thing on Indiana, who we both have in. Neither of us like it at all. 4-10 against quads 1 and 2. They still have home games remaining against Northwestern and Minnesota. If they win them both, like I think, what is the exactly? Northwestern is 78, Minnesota is 73. So that, I mean, it probably keeps Northwestern out of the top 75, knocks Minnesota out of the top 75. So those are probably both quad 3 games. And they need to win both of those, and they probably need to win either the home game against Michigan State or the road game against Ohio State, lest they drop to 4-12 against quads 1 and 2. Even if they go 3-1, they're going to be 5-11 against quads 1 and 2 heading into the Big Ten tournament. I mean, we have them in, but it's not in any way, shape, or form a vote of confidence or a, you know, anything we like about their resume beyond the fact that they have no losses outside of quad 1. That's the big thing I can't get past. I think it's a very North Carolina-ish resume at this point, but even the Tar Heels, I think, ended up with a quad 3 loss when all was said and done, when they finally got their quad 1 win last year. Talk me off a ledge with Indiana because I wanted to kick them out and keep USC in, and I might look at it again because, like you said earlier, USC is 9-7 against quads 1 and 2, and Indiana's 4-10.
I'm with you. I want Indiana out of the tournament right now. I just look at those teams behind them and I'm like, ugh, it's a hard sell. Ohio State's not doing it for me. VCU's not doing it for me. Virginia Tech's not doing it for me. Somebody has to be in there right now. So I think a lot of these teams are kind of, I don't want to say they're like holding place spots, but it is a snapshot in time of where they're at right now. These things with one game, when you're around the bubble, you saw what happened with UCLA. They were an easy out for me and then didn't score a layup. And so they're an easy in for me. Like that's how much these things can change. Virginia Tech, I'm looking at them over here. If they had hit a shot at the end against Miami, or if SMU doesn't hit it, like these things, like they are that close to switching these things entirely. So again, these are not holding spots per se, but they could change very fast. And I do not like Indiana's profile. It screams out of the tournament to me, but somebody has to prove they belong in over them. Maybe some bid stealers could potentially be the one that ultimately does Indiana in. And let's not forget, you're talking about 4-12 against Q1 and Q2. Last year they were 4-12 against Quad 1, and that was not enough to make the tournament.
Hmm.
This time they're 4-12 against quads 1 and 2. That is a much worse mark if you're looking from the quad split side.
Um, Last quick question: do you still have Ohio State at 69, or that was before the Michigan State result?
Yeah, if I had to guess, Ohio State would probably slot in before VCU, but after Virginia Tech at this point.
Okay. So New Mexico's knocking on the door for you. Let's get them there. Maybe they'll beat San Diego State and finish the fight. All right, that will do it for today. What even is the Iowa-Wisconsin score? I don't know. But yeah, big result there with Michigan State keeping Ohio State out for now would be nice. I'm all in. I like where your head's at. Hopefully, we'll get some bid thieves to knock out these teams like Indiana. But until next time, take care and enjoy the hoops.